My thanks also to Ari for his great reporting and great presentation, and also to Noura for her courage, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say. My thanks to all organisers and participants. It's really great to join this timely counter-extremism project discussion. I mean, the Houthis have long been a worry to anyone concerned with the well-being of the Yemeni people, or the stability of the Arabian Peninsula, or indeed security in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. But the prominent role that the Houthis have taken upon themselves since October the 7th in this so-called axis of resistance has taken these concerns to a new level. Meanwhile, something very odd has happened in the public reaction in Western countries to the complex crisis in the Middle East. Islamist extremists sympathetic to Hamas and the Houthis have been marching in London and other cities side by side with misguided, self-proclaimed progressives who would be arrested and beaten or worse if they lived in Gaza or in northern Yemen. The two groups appear to be united only by hatred of Israel and the Jews, and loathing or self-loathing of Western culture and values. Of all of the extremist and terrorist groups that take their lead from Iran, the Houthis are one of the more independent-minded. They're capable of refusing to do Iran's bidding when it conflicts with their own interests, but they have become increasingly enthusiastic co-belligerents with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the Iraqi Shia militias. The evidence now suggests that the Iranians are fully witting partners in this Houthi aggression. Iran is also directly involved in stoking up anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish incitement on the streets of Western cities. Now, having spent a good deal of time negotiating with the Houthis directly, at a time when I was solely focused on achieving peace in Yemen, I want to confirm from direct experience the vital warning that Ari has sounded in his excellent papers that we are discussing today. The Houthis are not a liberation movement. They are an extraordinarily virulent, chauvinistic, and violent group of oppressors. I don't want to go into detail on the abuses covered in Ari's papers. He and Noura are better placed to make that clear. Ari, I think, has already expressed it in the most lurid terms, and of course, Noura has direct personal experience of Houthi mistreatment. I will just add on this point that I strongly support the idea of a large increase in the use of sanctions against these vile abusers of women, religious minorities, and journalists. Sanctions have been underutilized and under-enforced in the case of Yemen. But I think I can probably more usefully contribute to this webinar with anecdotes from my own direct experience of the Houthis, some thoughts on the challenge that they pose today. I remember two moments of brutal clarity from senior Houthi leaders. One was when they told me, long before they actually did it, that they were only in an alliance of convenience with Ali Abdullah Saleh, the former president of Yemen, but as soon as he ceased to be useful to them, they would kill him. And the second moment was when they told me that they would inevitably win in Yemen in the end. And they said this was because you care and we don't, were the words that they used. You care about the deaths of Yemenis. We don't care how many die. When enough have died, you will beg us to make peace. Now later, of course, when I saw their snipers in Aden and Taz killing civilians for sport, doctors and nurses in a hospital ducking under window frames to go about their business because a gat-crazed Houthi sniper on a rooftop opposite was picking off anyone showing themselves at a window. My Houthi interlocutor's words really came back to me at that time. Now, most of my reflections on the Houthis date from the period from November 2014 to January 2017, when I was preparing to take over as British ambassador to Yemen and then actually doing the job, albeit frustratingly from exile in Jeddah, because we had to withdraw from Sana'a in early 2015. I should say that those chilling conversations I mentioned came very early in that time in Muscat, where I traveled in order to facilitate contact between the US and the Houthis, who at that time were willing to talk to us, but not to the Americans. The Omanis graciously hosted 2 sessions of talks between me and senior Houthis, which amounted to about 10 hours of intense debate and negotiation in Arabic. I succeeded in the limited scope of my mission, and the US Houthi contact was indeed established. Later, I played a prominent support role in 3 sessions of peace talks between the Houthis and representatives of President Hadi. I also reached out extensively to Saleh loyalists and associates to try to work on that side of the Yemeni puzzle, working closely with the excellent UN envoys, Ismail Old Sheikh Ahmed and Kenny Gluck. We tried everything to achieve peace, but we came up short. The peace talks were certainly picturesque. They progressed from utter frustration in Geneva, where the Houthis would not even engage, and the government side showed up with an al-Qaeda associated delegate. And then the United Nations Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, crazily decided to show up to force a photo opportunity. The sole effect of that was to give the Houthis the opportunity to secure concessions by threatening to scupper his plans and not show up for the photo. Later, back in Switzerland, several months later, in fact, in the mountains, the 2 sides did finally come together, albeit reluctantly and rather unproductively. Then came the 3rd round of talks in Kuwait in the spring and summer of 2016, the real peace talks, which I think may still be the closest that we have come to a positive outcome. We stayed in a comfortable hotel for about 3 months. The UN, US, UK, many of the group of ambassadors supporting peace in Yemen, then known as the G18, the group of 18 ambassadors. The Kuwaitis also provided a guest palace for some of the talks. They were gracious, accommodating hosts, but the same cannot be said for their Houthi guests, who endlessly made unreasonable demands, insisted on a constant supply of gat, which is an illegal drug in Kuwait, whose supply or possession is usually a serious criminal offense. The Houthis would arrive late at meetings, they would indulge in tantrums, they would walk out, they would make threats and recriminations, and they would change their negotiating position from day to day. There was a hilarious standoff when the chief Houthi negotiator, Mohammed Abdulsalam, was shut out of his Facebook account because of the hateful material on it. Fixing that problem, i.e. getting him back on Facebook despite the hateful material, required his ID. His ID indicated that he was 13 years old. Turned out that he'd traveled to Kuwait on his son's passport. The Houthi delegation contained genuine seniors who continue to hold significant positions in the movement to this day. But I must record a reflection from a respected Yemeni politician, I would say a beloved Yemeni politician, Abdul Karim al-Iriani, whose death during my time working on Yemen was generally felt as an end of an era sort of tragedy. Speaking of Mehdi Mashat, one of the most senior and certainly the most obnoxious and destructive member of the Houthi delegation, Iriani is said to have commented that his preferment to a senior role in those days was Iriani's own signal to sign off and die. Now, Mehdi Mashat had grown up in Sada as a feckless and meritless thug who just happened to be in Abdelmalek al-Houthi's circle. And it seems that that is enough qualification to rise high in the de facto administration that now sits in Sana'a. Nevertheless, we kept at it, and we edged closer and closer to an agreement. The chief Houthi negotiator and spokesman, Mohammed Abdulsalam, who retains that role to this day, was serious about the Kuwait talks. He earned the confidence of the Saudis, and the outline of an agreement took shape, whereby the Houthis would essentially hold most levers of power in Yemen. Saudi Arabia would withdraw with dignity. President Hadi would be marginalized, but his negotiators recognized that the Saudis and others would not support them in opposing this outcome. Just when we thought we had a deal, the instructions from Sada changed. Abdelmalek al-Houthi was said to be angry with Mohammed Abdulsalam's supposed concessions, and the Houthis walked away, and peace talks went on ice for years. Now, over the following 8 years, battle lines have not moved as much as they did in 2014 to 2016, but Yemen has suffered horrific casualties and damage. Besides Sana'a, contested cities like Hodeidah, Taz, Marib have been devastated. The UN estimates acute food insecurity to affect many millions of Yemenis. Naturally, the focus of the international community has been on peacemaking, as mine was. This limited the appetite for calling the Houthis a terrorist group until their increasing attacks beyond the borders of Yemen caused a shift in opinion. Initially, the Houthis mainly attempted to hit targets far inside Saudi Arabia with only occasional success. In early 2021, at the time of the transition from the Trump to the Biden administration in Washington, D.C., the Houthis were first designated by the US as terrorists in January, and then had the designation lifted in February. But when the Houthis conducted a lethal drone and missile attack on Abu Dhabi in January 2022, the UAE skillfully used its temporary position on the Security Council to secure Resolution 2624, which branded the Houthis as a terrorist group for the first time by the UN. Now, I don't want to go on much longer. It's important to hear from Noura because of her direct personal insights. But I'll just very briefly say, of course, I've referred so far to the state of affairs up to the 6th of October 2023. But now the scenario has changed very significantly with the Houthis embarking on this very eye-catching and disruptive program of attacking shipping in the Red Sea. And so the policy challenges that we're looking at are no longer just to do with peace in Yemen or human rights in Yemen or humanitarian delivery in Yemen, but also to keeping the Suez Canal open and the Red Sea shipping lanes open. And that has necessitated some military action by the United States and its allies. So we're now into a very different period with the Houthis taking on a very different profile in international consciousness. And the challenge, of course, of what to do about Iran, which is the main power and the main supplier behind the Houthis. So we can come to that during the Q&A at some point if people would like to. But for now, I will pause. Thank you.